Before we jump into today's case, I do want to put out a trigger warning for anyone listening or watching. Today's episode will touch on some topics such as eating disorders, homicidal ideation, and violent fantasies such as school shootings. If any of that is triggering for you, just click out of this and I will see you next time. Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I am your host of Killer Instinct. And before we get started, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can always find that over on our Patreon. We post an additional 3 episodes a month and an exclusive live stream at the end of the month over on Patreon. So if you are interested in checking out any of those episodes, the link is always in the description. If you are listening on Spotify, you will be able to find those episodes if you scroll through the feed, or at the top of the page you can click that link as well. But with that all being said, you guys, let's talk about the real reason we are here today. Today we have an absolutely horrifying case. As you can tell by the title of this episode, today we are talking about the brutal double homicide of Oliver Northrup and Claudia Maupin. I'm really curious to hear your guys' thoughts on today's episode. This is a case where I truly believe police had stopped a serial killer in the making, and you will soon hear why I believe that as we continue. So with that being said, let's jump right on into today's case. Oliver Northrup was born on April 26, 1925 in Grand Island, Nebraska, to his parents Eleanor and Oliver Sr. Oliver served in the Navy during World War II and afterwards went on to receive his undergraduate's degree from UCLA and his law degree from UC Berkeley School of Law. Now, although Oliver was a lawyer, his true passion lied in literature. He had memorized countless of passages from Western literature. He also had a passion for music. He loved all sorts of music and began playing the guitar in his 30s. Alongside his lawyer work and his passion for music, Oliver also worked at the county fair every single year. This was one of his favorite things to do. He worked at the Sunday barbecue at the county fair. Now, Oliver had been married 3 times throughout the course of his life, and his last marriage was to his wife, Claudia Maupin. Claudia was born on May 15, 1936, to her parents, Arnold and Marie. Claudia was known for her bright spirit. She had an infectious laugh and an ability to make every person she met feel so loved. Claudia's family said that she had a special talent of making you feel special. She had a talent for making everyone around her feel like they were the most important person in the room. Claudia was known to be a hugger, and in fact, her family and friends used to say that they would have to prep people for a Claudia hug. It was a specific signature style hug that she had, and Claudia and Oliver in particular, they met at the Unitarian Universalist Church, which is in Davis, California. And this is where Claudia was working as a pastoral associate. So her and Oliver met, they immediately hit it off, and they got married in 1996. Now, when the two of them got married, they had combined their families together. And to put it into perspective, both of them did have pretty big families on both sides of them. Oliver had 6 children, and Claudia had 3 children with an additional 2 stepchildren from a previous marriage of hers. Together, their blended family had 11 children, 14 grandchildren, and 8 great-grandchildren. So it was a big family filled with lots of love and laughter. But unfortunately, that came to an end in 2013. This case really begins on April 14th of 2013. And on this specific day, Claudia and Oliver did not go to church as they typically would. Now, this was something that was very abnormal for them to just not show up, not tell anyone that they weren't going to be going, so it raised concerns for their family. Oliver's family tried calling him many times, however, they did not get an answer. So at this point, one of Oliver's sons, named Robert, decided that he would go by the home to just check on his dad and Claudia. Now, when Robert arrived to the house, he knocked on the door but didn't get an answer, so he assumed that his dad and Claudia were out. Maybe they were running errands, maybe something just happened where they couldn't make it to church that day, or maybe they were out of town. So they weren't jumping to the worst case scenario at that point. However, later that night on the 14th, when still no one was able to get a hold of Oliver or Claudia, Claudia's daughter Laura decided that she wanted to go over to the house. She had a feeling that something just wasn't sitting right with her, and she wanted to make sure that Claudia and Oliver were okay and were safe. So what she did is she ended up going over to the house with the police escorts. She had called the police and asked them to accompany her at the home that evening. So Laura did just that. Laura and police arrived at the home and rang the doorbell. However, there was no answer. At this point, Laura decided that she was going to go around to the back of the home, and this is when she discovered that one of the back windows, which just so happened to be the bedroom of Oliver and Claudia, their bedroom window had been opened and the window screen was clearly slashed. Now, when looking through the window, when just peeking through, Laura was able to see that there were blood stains, which immediately, as you can imagine, sparked grave concern. At this point, police lit up their flashlight into the room, and that is when they discovered Claudia and Oliver brutally murdered. Police immediately forced entry into the home, and that is when they discovered Claudia and Oliver's bodies in their bed. Now, the autopsy showed that Oliver and Claudia were both stabbed to death. Oliver also did have defensive wounds on his hands, which made it clear that he did try and defend himself and Claudia during the attack. Now, all in all, Oliver had over 70 cuts on his body. He had stab wounds in his leg, and the medical examiner noted that the knife went completely through his leg for those specific stab wounds. Now, unexpectedly, the medical examiner also did notice something that she was very thrown off about, and that was in Oliver's stomach, there was a pinkish drinking cup placed in Oliver's stomach. And you might be wondering how this was possible, but you should also know that this should show you the lengths and the extent of Oliver and Claudia's injuries. Oliver and Claudia were completely disemboweled. They had been mutilated. It was an absolutely horrific scene. This was not a case, obviously, of Oliver swallowing this specific item. This item was placed in Oliver's stomach by whoever was responsible for this. Now, regarding Claudia, the medical examiner had said that Claudia had minimal damage to her face. However, she had significant injuries to her neck, mouth, jaw, and spine. Claudia's left arm also had multiple stab wounds, and similarly to Oliver, the ME also extracted a foreign object from Claudia's stomach, and this time, this was a black Nokia cell phone, which again is very unexpected. We have done over 300 cases on this podcast alone, and never once have we talked about foreign objects of this nature being found inside of the victims. So it was very, very unexpected. Now, all in all, Claudia suffered from 67 stab wounds, and collectively between Oliver's injuries and Claudia's injuries, there were 128 stab wounds. Now, regarding the investigation, police had very little to go off of. There was no physical evidence around the house whatsoever. Obviously, they did see that there was forced entry as the window screen was slashed, but there were no DNA, no fingerprints, and no footprints throughout the house. And along with that, when police were speaking with Oliver and Claudia's family and friends, they were trying to get a gauge as to if anyone would want to hurt Oliver or Claudia, but that was not the case. Oliver and Claudia were an elderly couple who were harmless. They were just living their lives and loving their families, and that was it. It seemed absolutely unimaginable that someone would want to do this to them, especially something to this degree. It was unimaginable that anyone would want to hurt them in general, but to go to the lengths that this murder was taken seemed absolutely unbelievable. And because of this, it left police with no leads to go off of. So with no DNA and no leads in the case, police really were at a dead end in the investigation. And that continued for the next few months. Police were trying to gather as much information as they could, but they were struggling. But everything changed in June of 2013, so just a couple months later, when police got a tip that they were not anticipating. A teenage boy had told detectives that he knew exactly who killed Claudia and who killed Oliver. When it comes to eating healthy, I keep running into the same problem time and time again. I want to eat healthy, but the time it takes to meal prep and think about what I'm going to cook and plan out what my meal schedule will look like for the week, it can get overwhelming. I'm getting married in 2025, and while I want to focus on maintaining a nutritious diet, I have a million other things on my mind that don't allow me to carve time out to prioritize healthier eating, and I know I'm not alone in that. But luckily, that is where Hungry Root comes into the picture. Hungry Root is like having your own personal nutritionist. They take care of the stressful meal planning each week by recommending delicious recipes tailored to your taste, nutrition preferences, and health goals. They make it easy to eat high-quality, nutritious foods and achieve any diet or health goals by tailoring recipes to a variety of lifestyles. Anything from anti-inflammatory to gut-friendly to gluten-free, dairy-free, high protein, and more. Planning meals and cooking really can be simple and stress-free. You just tell them what your goals and your preferences are, and they will fill your cart with personalized recommendations that get smarter as they learn more about what you liked or what you didn't love. And there's no high fructose corn syrups, no artificial sweeteners or preservatives in any of Hungry Root's food. They only source top quality meat and seafood free from hormones and antibiotics. Most Hungry Root recipes can be made in just 15 minutes or less. And with over 15,000 recipes shipped each week, there is something for every taste and nutrition preference. I love Hungry Root, and you guys can take advantage of this exclusive offer. For a limited time, get 40% off your first box, plus get a free item in every box for life. Go to hungryroot.com/killer and use code KILLER. That's hungryroot.com/killer, code KILLER to get 40% off your first box and a free item of your choice for life. hungryroot.com/killer, code KILLER. There was a teenage boy who went to detectives and told them that he knew exactly who killed Claudia and Oliver, and he was also worried that he would kill again. And the person who this boy claimed killed Oliver and Claudia was a 15-year-old boy named Daniel Marsh. Daniel was born on May 14th, 1997 to his parents, Sherry and Bill Marsh. He was raised in Davis, California, and he attended Davis Senior High School. Now, in 2008, when Daniel was only 10 years old, his parents ended up divorcing, which, as you can imagine, took a large emotional toll on Daniel as well as Daniel's sister. Now, allegedly, it has been stated that the reason for the divorce was because Sherry had an affair while married to Bill. It was said that the two of them did have a tumultuous relationship. There was consistent arguing and consistent fighting. However, the affair was really the straw that broke the camel's back. And according to Daniel's mom, she did say that after the divorce, Daniel got very quiet. He got very tense. She could notice a definite change and shift in her son. Now, that same year, at the age of 10, Daniel was recognized by the American Red Cross, and he was actually given the Heroes Award because Daniel had given his father CPR while his dad Bill was having a heart attack. So Bill had a heart attack. Daniel performed CPR on his dad before the paramedics arrived, and the American Red Cross rewarded and honored him with the Heroes Award. And hearing that is very ironic because Daniel, who was once given an award for saving a life, saving his father's life, then turned into someone who fantasized about ending others. Now, it was said that after the divorce is when Daniel's homicidal fascinations really begin. By age 11, it was said that Daniel was having dreams of murder. He told his therapist that he had fantasies of not just murdering people, but torturing other people. And again, this was at age 11. And he told his therapist that he wanted to make those fantasies a reality. Now, when Daniel was 11 years old, he was diagnosed with adjustment disorder and depression. Now, adjustment disorder is really exactly what it sounds like. It is a condition that occurs when someone has difficulty coping and adjusting with significant changes in life or a stressful event. And in Daniel's case, he was diagnosed with this, and it indicated that he struggled emotionally to manage life changes. And it was clear based off of the timing of the diagnosis and what was happening in Daniel's life at the time that the divorce definitely seemed to cause some sort of shift for him, some sort of turmoil. However, this would only be the beginning of Daniel's psychological problems. In May of 2010, Daniel began seeing a clinical social worker from Kaiser Permanente, and in this social worker, whose name is David, in David's intake form about Daniel, he noted that Daniel was having nightmares and some behavioral outbursts. David also noted that Daniel had insecurities and was nervous about not being liked by other people, and because of this, Daniel began taking an antidepressant in August of 2010 when he was 13 years old. But that same year is also when Daniel started to experiment and use alcohol and marijuana. He was traveling back and forth from his parents' home and engaging in this reckless behavior, and the behavior got so extreme, he was using drugs and alcohol so frequently that his dad, Bill, ended up kicking Daniel out of the house because of these issues. Because Daniel wouldn't stop drinking and wouldn't stop smoking, his father had enough and he drew a line in the sand. So at this point, Daniel continued staying at his mom's house, who it has been said was not very strict on Daniel's drug and alcohol usage, whether she was aware of it or not. It has been said that she was not very strict pertaining to these habits that Daniel had. Now, in October of 2011, Daniel did begin struggling with an eating disorder. He developed anorexia when he was 14 years old and was down to 93 pounds and placed in an intensive outpatient program. And during this time, he was also taking multiple different medications. And while at this program and during this treatment, this is where Daniel's violent thoughts had began to amp up and began to increase. In 2012, Daniel told a school counselor that he was only having more homicidal fantasies, which led to him being involuntarily hospitalized because at this point it was said that not only was he a threat to other people, but also to himself, and his medication at this point was switched again. Now, after being in the hospital for a few weeks and then released, Daniel, months later, then went on to talk to his school counselor again, this time saying that he had full confidence in himself, that he would be able to pull off a murder, and not only that, injure and hurt his other classmates. He told the school counselor that he wanted to torture people by peeling skin from their hands and cutting their eyelids. And he was very vocal about the fact that these fantasies that he was sharing were only scratching the surface of his thoughts. And what once went from Daniel only having these conversations with his doctors and with his counselors soon spread to him also having these conversations with his friends. He would tell people that his goal and his dream was to become a serial killer. He went on to say that he had thoughts of torturing others and also committing a school shooting. He said that if he was ever caught, he would simply just just plead insanity. He had also made a detailed plan to kill his girlfriend's ex-boyfriend. During art classes, he would draw very violent pictures, and he had a lot of interest in serial killers such as Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer, and the list went on and on. In 2012, Daniel also became fascinated in what's referred to as gorge porn and also animal cruelty. He was murdering cats, he strangled one cat to death, and he also asked a friend if the friend would be okay with Daniel killing his dog. It was also said that he killed a raccoon on one occasion as well. So with this being said, now that you have a little bit of a background on Daniel and what his life looked like leading up to Claudia and Oliver's murders, let's get back into the investigation. So as I had mentioned, a friend of Daniel's went to the detectives to turn Daniel in. This specific friend told detectives that the reason he is so confident about Daniel being responsible for this is not only because of everything that I just shared with you, but also after the murders, Daniel began bragging about what he had done to his friends and also how he planned to continue to kill. He was very vocal about the fact that this was not going to be his last time doing this and that this was only scratching the surface of what he was capable of. Now, his friend did say that he wasn't sure whether or not he believed Daniel at first. He said that he was in a state of shock hearing everything that Daniel was saying, that he wasn't sure if what Daniel was saying was even true. However, what sparked the friend going to detectives and turning Daniel in was because Daniel had broken into his ex-girlfriend's home and threatened her life. And at that point, this friend knew that he needed to do something and also knew based off of his actions that Daniel probably wasn't lying. So at this point, he ended up going to his dad. This friend did. The friend went to his dad and told him what he knew and told him that he wanted to go to detectives, and the two of them went to the police station to talk to them about what they knew. Now, on June 17th, a high school rescue officer brought Daniel into the police station for questioning. Daniel was interrogated by a detective named Ariel Panetta, as well as an FBI special agent named Chris Campion. Now, initially, when sitting down with detectives, Daniel denied any involvement with the murders. He immediately, upon sitting down, actually broke down in tears and begged for the officers to believe him. He was pleading with them, saying that they have the wrong person. He had nothing to do with this. He doesn't know Claudia. He didn't know Oliver. However, after 3.5 hours of interrogation, Daniel finally cracked. And when he did, not only did he confess to the murders, but he went into specific detail of how proud he was that he was able to do something like this. During his interrogation, Daniel told detectives, quote unquote, "I had to do it. I couldn't take it anymore. I lost control." Daniel went on to tell authorities that he had been hunting for someone to kill, and on the night of April 13th, he decided that tonight was going to be the night. Prior to the murders, Daniel said that he had spent meticulous time planning out how he was going to execute this. He said on the night of April 13th, he had taped the bottom of his shoes. That way he would not leave behind footprints. He also wore gloves, avoiding any fingerprints that could possibly be left behind. He wore all black clothing and a black face mask in order to avoid his identity being seen. And the murder weapon was a 6-inch buck knife that he kept with him. Daniel said that he spent some time walking Claudia and Oliver's street on the early morning hours of April 14th. He said that he actually checked between 40 and 50 homes to see if anyone had an open window or an unlocked door. And I think that that needs to be made very clear right now. Daniel did not know Claudia and Oliver. There was no connection between Daniel and Claudia and Oliver. There was no personal connection whatsoever. It just so happened that Daniel stumbled upon an open window in Oliver and Claudia's home. That was it. Daniel said that when he found the open window, he opened it up. He then slashed the window screen. He walked into the bedroom where Claudia and Oliver were sleeping in the early morning hours of April 14th. 14th. He said that he stood and watched them sleep for approximately 10 minutes while he was trying to figure out his course of action and how he was going to kill them. He said that he felt nervous and excited and adrenaline running through him, but he had to act fast because unexpectedly, Claudia woke up. Daniel said that when Claudia woke up and saw him, she began screaming, and that is when Daniel just began attacking. Daniel said that he immediately began stabbing Claudia in her torso, and as this was happening, he said Claudia was screaming and pleading for her life. And Daniel said that hearing Claudia's struggle and begging for her life only motivated him to attack her more. He said that it sparked a certain excitement in him when he heard her suffering. Now, while this was happening, Oliver, who was right next to Claudia, obviously woke up when he was hearing all of this go on, and Oliver did try and shield and defend his wife, but that is when Daniel turned his attention to him, and at that point, unfortunately, Claudia had already been murdered. Now, Daniel said he turned his attention to Oliver and began stabbing him, and he said that even after he knew that Claudia and Daniel were officially dead, he still stabbed them even further because he said it just felt right. And as I told you in the autopsy, as if murdering them was not enough, Daniel had completely mutilated their bodies. Daniel had confessed that he had sliced Oliver and Claudia's bodies open and examined their intestines. He had disemboweled them and removed their organs from their bodies. Daniel said that he tried to extract Claudia's eye with his knife, but he found it to be too difficult. And so instead, he said that he pulled the fat from out of her leg. He said that he also cut open Oliver's forehead out of just pure curiosity. Now, Daniel also admitted that he was the one who put the drinking glass and cell phone inside of each of their bodies, and he said that he did this to play mind games with the police and with the detectives who would go on to investigate the murders. He wanted to throw them off. That is how deeply calculated this was. This wasn't just a case of Daniel wanting to kill someone, which I don't say that lightly, but this was the case of someone who wanted to go as far as playing games with the people who were going to try and solve these murders, playing mind games and really trying to antagonize and taunt authorities. Now, Daniel was very open about how committing the murders was the most exciting feeling he had ever felt in his life. He told police that he loves the feeling of his victims resisting him. He said that had he not been caught, he would have committed more murders. During his interrogation, Daniel said, quote, "I don't feel sympathy for people at all. I do not feel empathy for them," end quote. He then went on to explain how he would kill the detective that was sitting right in front of him, which I do want to point out that this was a question that the detective had asked Daniel. Daniel went on to say that there were multiple methods that he would use to murder the specific detective. He said that he, on one hand, could take the detective and smash his head into the wall. He also mentioned strangling the specific detective with his tie. Now, Daniel then went on to say that police could find all of the evidence that they need to convict him in his mom's garage. He fully gave all of that up. He told them that if they wanted more evidence other than just a verbal confession, they would find all of the evidence that they needed in his mom's garage. And sure enough, he was right. All of the bloody clothing that Daniel wore during the murders and the knife that was used was found in his mom's garage. Now, immediately, Daniel was arrested and charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder with special enhancements for intentionally killing more than one person, demonstrating exceptional depravity, lying in wait, and inflicting torture. Daniel pled not guilty, but he also pled insanity. Daniel's defense team had him examined by a psychiatrist, and when Daniel and the psychiatrist met, Daniel actually threatened to kill the psychiatrist. The psychiatrist did find that Daniel was mentally ill, but also said that he was sane and fit to stand trial. And we also have to take into consideration what friends of Daniel's had said in the past, where Daniel had mentioned that if he were to ever get caught, he would automatically plead insanity. Now, regardless of the psychiatrist's diagnosis, the defense continued with the insanity defense. They also filed a motion to try and get Daniel's confession thrown out. However, the judge denied this motion. Now, the trial for Daniel began on September 2nd, 2014, and Daniel at this point was 17 years old. Regardless of his age, he was tried as an adult. The jury consisted of 8 men and 4 women, and the trial lasted a total of 5 weeks. The defense in the trial tried to insinuate that the side effects from Daniel's medication that he had been on all throughout the majority of his life leading up to this murder, combined with his mental illness, is what triggered the homicidal thoughts and caused him to go temporarily insane. However, the prosecution argued that Daniel was manipulative and that he had committed the murders in a premeditated rage and a calculated manner. Then, on September 26, 2014, after multiple witnesses had taken the stand, the jury took 2 hours to reach their verdict, and that is when they found Daniel guilty on both counts of first-degree murder, and they also concluded that Daniel was sane when he committed these murders. Now, even though Daniel was tried as an adult, him being under the age of 18 when these murders were committed made him ineligible for the death penalty, and so instead, he received a sentence of life in prison. However, he does have the possibility of parole. The maximum sentence that he was able to receive was 52 years to life, and the judge found that Daniel would serve that sentence. So he sentenced him to 52 years to life, but he got parole eligibility after the 52 years. So after 52 years, Daniel would be eligible for parole. However, California law will allow Daniel to be eligible for parole after only 25 years. You may be asking yourself how this is possible. Well, in 2013, the California legislature passed a bill which established a youth offender parole hearing. Now, this was for offenders who were incarcerated for crimes that they committed as minors. If the sentence for the specific inmate was less than 25 years to life, then the inmate would be eligible for parole or release during their 20th year of incarceration. But if the sentence was 25 years or greater, which it was in Daniel's case, they are eligible to be released or paroled after the 25 years, which is exactly what is happening to Daniel. So this really lessens Daniel's potential sentence by a lot. It is going to be very interesting to see in about 10 or so years if he is eligible for parole. I think the fact personally that Daniel has been very vocal over the fact that he was going to kill again, he would kill again. He found satisfaction in killing just for the sake of killing itself. He went as far as premeditating these murders to the furthest degree he could. He was in tune enough to know in order to, go throughout this undetected, to tape the bottom of his shoes to not leave behind footprints. He was wearing gloves to avoid fingerprints. This was very calculated. This was very meticulous. Daniel thought this through. And had that specific friend not gone to authorities and turned Daniel in, who's to say whether or not he would have been caught for this? I'm sure that he would have gone on to murder again because that's exactly what he said he was going to do. So it'll be very interesting moving forward to see if there are any developments in this. If he eventually does get paroled, it'll be very interesting to see. But let me know what your thoughts are about this in the comments below. Do you think that Daniel got a fair sentence? Do you think that it should be more? Do you think that it should be less? Let me know your thoughts and opinions below. But with that being said, you guys, that is all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning into another episode of Killer Instinct. Again, if you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah. I'm your host. Before you leave, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. And we also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well. Like I said in the beginning, if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can always find that over on our Patreon. The link is in the description. I will be back next week with a brand new case for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.